Hello, ChefConf. It is wonderful to be back. No matter where I go, this community always feels like home. I always knew the chef community was strong, but until this year, even I didn't know how strong it truly is. Every day I see how we have persisted, not just in creating technology together, but in supporting and lifting each other up through this crisis. Over the past few months, we have seen the world discovering what we already know. Community is absolutely vital to solve the problems we face. No one person, no one company, no one industry, and no one nation can solve this pandemic alone. It is essential to work together. Whether that's scientists collaborating on a vaccine, whether that's our heroic doctors and nurses caring for those who are sick, whether that's people like you and me reaching out to each other and showing that we care through our actions. Here at ChefConf, we know the value of community, but it's taken some time for the rest of the tech industry and the rest of the world to catch up to us. Do you remember the film Jurassic Park? There's this wonderful moment in it where one of the characters sits down in front of a computer and exclaims, "It's a UNIX system. I know this." And using her UNIX skills, she saves the day. I remember wanting to be that girl. I wanted to be the tech superhero. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, as a culture, we really embraced the idea of the lone tech genius, the person who can solve any problem if they are given a little time, a little space, and a lot of caffeine. This image still persists in some places today. The problem with it is it misses a crucial truth of our current time. All the big technical problems that could be solved by one person have already been solved. Even though we may not have realized it at the time, those were actually the easy problems. Now we have to face the hard problems. And as our world and our connections expand, it's only going to get harder. The reason it gets so hard is because we have shifted from dealing with complicated systems to dealing with complex systems. When I say a complicated system, I mean a system that is knowable. A complicated system has many parts, but the way those parts are joined together are relatively simple, as General Stanley McChrystal states in his book, Team of Teams. Technical problems used to be complicated problems. If you got the right person with the right understanding of the system, they could solve nearly anything. However, the problems we face today, they're no longer complicated. They are complex. A complex system is not knowable. A complex system is constantly changing and is tightly integrated with other complex systems. Think about a system of microservices. Think about a system of hundreds or thousands or multiple systems of hundreds or thousands of microservices that must integrate with each other and interact with each other as each of those services grows and changes. This is hard. This is part of the reason Habitat was created, to make managing these complex technical systems possible. And a system's complexity is not limited to its technology. It also includes how real living and feeling human beings interact with it. Humans create these systems. Humans use these systems. Humans need to evolve and change these systems as the world evolves and changes. We need communities of humans to make these systems possible. A good example of a complex system is an open source software ecosystem. These ecosystems are sprawling networks of libraries, plugins, services, integrations, and so much more. They are also made up of people, individuals, and teams who use and contribute to the software. Chef was the first big open source ecosystem I worked in, and I learned a lot through it. Earlier this year, I took what I learned at Chef to my work in a different ecosystem, that of the Rust programming language. As you may know, Habitat is written mainly in Rust. I found the Rust community through my work as a core maintainer of Habitat. Rust is most well known for being a back-end systems programming language, but that is not all it is used for. People use it for everything from embedded hardware to web applications and much more. It is wonderful to see Rust used so widely, but this also means that any changes to the Rust ecosystem have the potential to profoundly affect different projects in different ways. This makes it a very complex environment to work in. Despite the complexity, the reason Rust is successful and continues to grow is because of our incredible community of coders, technical writers, community managers, and so many more people. The ultimate leaders of the Rust ecosystem are the Rust core team. And in 2018 at ChefConf, they presented on the difference between open source by serendipity and open source on purpose. I took the liberty to rephrase this as community by serendipity versus community on purpose. Open source communities, or any community, can seem like they form spontaneously, and that is how they often start. In the early days of the Rust project, we would sometimes get a pull request out of the blue without any action on the part of the maintainers. And that pull request would implement exactly what the project needed exactly at that time. It was serendipity, and it feels really, really good when serendipity happens, but it is not sustainable. Like any organization or relationship, no matter how magical it seems when it starts, you have to work at it in order to make it last. For a community to not only stay strong, but also grow and evolve, it must be cultivated and nurtured intentionally. It won't happen on its own. We must do it on purpose. Over the years, I've noticed 3 common things that every community must do in order to last. And the first can be summarized as ask and point. We need to not only ask for help, we also need to point people to where and how they can help. In the open source world, it's just not enough to tell a potential new contributor to pick up a GitHub issue and expect them to work through it completely on their own. Trying to solve any project's issue without at least some context is not only hard, it also feels extremely risky. A new contributor does not know how people will react when they submit that pull request or when they ask questions. It can feel very unpredictable. One of the ways we ask and point in the Rust community is through labeling issues as easy or good first issues when we triage them. These are usually fairly contained to one section of the code base. Someone can work through them without needing to know the entire project. Additionally, we also often assign an experienced contributor to serve as a mentor to anyone who wants to work in that issue. Having a mentor introduces a feeling of safety for a new contributor. It lets those contributors know they will not be alone. They have someone they can call upon for context and for help. Another part of making sure people don't ever feel like they are alone is making a space for the community where they can work together and help each other. I first heard this phrase, make a space, also from the Rust core team. In Rust, we use a mix of chat applications, forums, and GitHub itself to propose ideas, discuss those ideas, help each other, and guide the forward evolution of the Rust language. Again, this is something we have to do deliberately, creating the space and making sure people know where it is so they can interact with other people in the community and work together. In order to make sure those interactions stay constructive and safe, we must set guidelines for how the community interacts with each other. Part of this is through having a code of conduct. Any community that does not have one should have one. But it doesn't stop there. Communities will change. And part of executing that change without alienating the community is through having processes that ensure every voice has a chance to be heard. One of the ways we do this in Rust is through our request for comment, or RFC process. This is how we decide how the language evolves and how we operate as a community. When someone wants to make a change, they write it up and then submit it as a pull request to our RFC GitHub repo. Then the whole community has a chance to comment on it. That's why it's called request for comments. If you are thinking this has the potential to get unruly, it does. But the key thing to understand is the whole point of an RFC is to find the best solution. The point of an RFC is not to win an argument. The choices on an RFC, they're not limited to do this or don't do this. RFCs often change profoundly as they respond to and incorporate feedback from the comments. More often than not, when it first seemed like we only had two choices, we find a third way, a way that the person who opened the RFC or any individual in the community did not have the context to consider. The reason we depend on the whole community to respond rather than a select few individuals is because the most valuable comments we receive come from someone's lived experience. I first heard this from Aaron Turon, a prominent Rust community member. Remember, Rust is used in so many different ways. None of us can individually hold all the context for all the different use cases in our minds. We must have the context of the whole community in order to develop the best solution. Once the request for comments period is over, someone does still need to make the hard decision of whether to implement the proposed change and how to implement it. This is decided by the Rust teams who are responsible for the relevant areas of the ecosystem. The job of these teams is to consider all the perspectives in the discussion and still produce a strong, coherent design. It's important to remember that the comments on an RFC are meant to inform the eventual decision. They don't dictate the decision. Again, the purpose is to find the best solution, not to win an argument. At its core, an RFC is a mission of discovery. It's a way for us to map the whole problem space before we decide on a solution. It's hard. Sometimes it's really hard, but the solutions we ultimately create are so much better as a result. This process probably sounds like it takes a long time, and to be honest, most of the time it does. The Rust community has the luxury of being able to move slowly to ensure that we do the best thing rather than the quick thing. Other communities, however, must move much faster. And one of my favorite recent examples of a very fast-moving technical community is the Cyber Threat Intelligence, or CTI League. This is a very new online global community with one specific goal: to neutralize threats exploiting the current pandemic, especially attacks on healthcare facilities. I personally believe there is a special place in hell for people who attack hospitals in the middle of a health crisis, but these attacks are happening, and the CTI League is working to stop them. In their own words, this is an unprecedented global emergency. Those of us in the cybersecurity community have come together to protect those on the front lines who are fighting for us. The COVID-19 cyber threat landscape is a very complex system. We need to neutralize a complex web of cyber threats that take advantage of humans who are fighting a very complex biological threat. No one person or one group of people could possibly do this by themselves. It takes a community to respond. When they formed the community, the founders of the CTI League followed the same 3 steps I mentioned earlier. First, they asked for help, and they made sure to ask for that help in channels where people they wanted to recruit were likely to be in. I personally heard about it through the CyberWire podcast, a cybersecurity focused podcast. Then they pointed anyone who was interested to a web form to apply. That meant there was one specific place to go for people who wanted to help. Once an applicant is approved, there is a vetting process. They are then added to a Slack team, and that Slack team is the space where the community gathers and works. Together, we are constantly detecting and responding to threats, both to technology systems and to human systems. The CTI League was founded in March of this year. After only 1 month of existence, it had recruited and vetted over 1,400 volunteers from 77 different countries across 22 time zones. This means if someone needs help, no matter what time of day it is, we can respond nearly instantaneously. The work we do together includes scanning the infrastructure of healthcare facilities for vulnerabilities, monitoring the dark web for compromised credentials being posted or sold, creating block lists that facilities can download and implement to block known attackers. We also investigate phishing emails and, when needed, initiate the domain takedown process to neutralize those phishing emails. Our work also includes tracking disinformation campaigns. There is a lot of weird stuff going on around this pandemic, like the idea that 5G cell towers cause COVID-19. These campaigns are causing real-world harm. In order to neutralize them, we must track them and understand where they are coming from and how they are spreading. We also respond to malware. When malware is detected on a system, we need to analyze it, both to figure out where it came from and how to stop it. And we do a lot more than I could possibly fit into one presentation. The CTI League itself is a complex system responding to a very complex threat. As part of that response, we have also set guidelines for communication. This includes defining what information can be shared and what information must be kept private. We really don't want people tweeting about an ongoing attack if it will potentially make the attack worse. The nature of our work dealing with active threats means we must define what can be shared and what cannot be shared as clearly as possible, and everyone in the community must have that context. How we do this is through a system we actually all learned about in kindergarten. It's the traffic light protocol. Information that we label as red absolutely cannot be disclosed. Information that is labeled as yellow, that's what limited disclosure is allowed. Often it's something we'll share with an organization that is being affected. Green means the information can be shared within the CTI League community, but only within the community, not with the general public. And when the information is labeled as white, that means that disclosure is not limited. It can be shared publicly. When everyone has the same, easy to remember, very clear context, it makes things so much easier. The CTI League is both a very young and a very effective technical community. And this may lead some of you to ask, does forming a community like this only work with young organizations? I mean, I haven't found anyone who would disagree with the statement that there is value in cultivating and nurturing community. But what comes next is always, what about established organizations like enterprises that are very set in their ways and procedures? Can this possibly work with them? Well, over the past year, I have been working with an organization that was established in 1775. This continuously operating organization is older than the country that it is in. It's the US Marine Corps. I know examples involving the military can be difficult for some people. History teaches us that a lot of technical and management advances were discovered in an environment of war. Whether we agree or not, these discoveries have made new things possible across our industries and across our world. It is important to acknowledge and understand where they came from in order to best learn from them. The Marines have always operated very well in the traditional domains of warfare, including air, land, and sea. In the 20th century, they added a fourth domain, space, to the list of domains that they operate in. Within the past 2 decades, a new domain of warfare has emerged, a fifth domain, and that is the cyber domain. In the cyber domain, the traditional command and control structures do not work. New methods of engagement are needed. To their great credit, the Marines realized they needed to change to respond to these new threats, and they needed help to do it. Last year, they started bringing in volunteers from across the tech industry to train, educate, advise, and mentor Marines. This is critical for them in order to keep pace with constantly evolving cyber threats and challenges. These volunteers make up the U.S. Marine Corps Cyber Auxiliary Unit, which I am very proud to be a part of. We are a community of volunteers who lend our industry expertise, both in technical tools and in cultural change needed for a technical organization to be as effective as it must be. When the Marines have a question either on technology or practices around technology, they now have a community of over 200 auxiliaries to draw from. We auxiliaries come from many different backgrounds. What we all have in common is that we are always ready to answer the call for help. Many organizations know they need to change, but they don't know how to do it. This is especially true in highly secure environments like the environment the Marines operate in. The only way I've found to do this successfully is to have a community to draw on. Even if it needs to be a private community of vetted individuals due to the nature of the work, that is still a community. Frankly, if the Marines can see the need to ask for help and create a community in order to fulfill their mission, your organization can do it too. Last year at ChefConf, I said this: community is vital to every business and every industry. And this remains true. But after the experiences of this year, I've altered that statement to community is vital to every single human being. This pandemic we face, it's not only one of the greatest physical threats we've ever encountered, certainly within my lifetime, it's also one of the greatest psychological threats we have ever seen. We are forced to isolate ourselves from each other currently. This is hard. I imagine just about everyone watching this has been affected by it. As a culture, we have a tendency to focus on individual acts of heroism, but no individual can possibly solve this enormously complex crisis alone. No matter who you are, no matter what your occupation, no matter who you are, no matter what your occupation, you have a duty to help. Your community, whether it's your family, your friends, your coworkers, whomever that community is made of, they need you. I need you. We need you. No matter what your situation, no matter how much you are hurting individually, you have the power to lift someone in your community up. Text them, email them, Slack them, set up a Zoom call. It's okay if you don't know what to say. That's normal. Simply tell them you are thinking of them, that you care about them, and then ask, what do you need? Doing this, it won't only help them. Connecting with another human being will also help you. So much is out of our control right now, but the ability to lift someone up, even just a little bit, that is within our power. Together, what we can do is limitless. And it starts with small actions, small ripples in the fabric of our communities and our world. The thing about ripples is, as ripples combine together, they turn into waves. And waves, as they come together, transform into seas of change. Start a ripple today and tomorrow and every day after that. Answer the call. Thank you.